Hello and welcome to a look at castles for the Amiga. A game that was released by Interplay made by Interplay and released by Electronic Arts in 1991, in which you take on the role of King Edward of England, or his wife. I think that was Queen Anne. I'm not sure. I never checked that. Sorry, but King Edward wanted to subdue Wales, and in order to fortify his holdings, he initiated the building of a total of 8 castles, whereas 6 of them were completed, and I'm fairly sure the remaining 2 never were completed. Some of the castles are very, very famous and incredibly huge and beautiful if you like castle structures. But in this game, if you play on higher than the lowest difficulty level, can select to do the campaign of building 8 castles. Now, you don't necessarily need to build them in the same way the real castles were built, and just a note, the names has been slightly changed. England is known as Albion, and Wales is known as the Celtic lands. So, just to make it slightly different and not necessarily having to be bound by historic writings, so the game could take some liberties. Also, of course, I mean, it's best to just rename things so no one takes offense, because everyone can take offense to everything. But regardless, you start by building Castle Flint, or in my case, Castle Ark. And you can get yourself bonus points if you remember that reference or know of that reference. Hint: Monty Python and the Holy Grail. You need to design the castle, and the way to ideally design it is you start with a tower and then you build 3 walls off in either direction, and then build another tower to make sure that the towers are the walls are supporting each other. The towers are individual structures that are built separately without relying on this adjoining walls for support, but the walls are definitely relying on the towers for stability support. So you can happily build a lot of towers, but you can't build a lot of walls. Your builders will start complaining about them being unstable. Throughout the game, you also get these interfering nuisances called subplots, things where you are presented with a problem and you have to deal with it in some way, shape or form. You can be as gentle as you want and risk being called a weak king, and you can be as harsh as you want and can risk being called a brutal bastard. Just can't win as a king, can you? Sometimes, because of course the Celts weren't overly happy about the idea of having massive castles that couldn't be taken easily, built in their land, they will randomly attack you. And of course you have some sort of military force you can deploy in order to prevent said attacks. Sort of. You can hire archers and infantry, and then you can set them up, and then you have very minimal control over the different units. You usually get an indication of where the enemy will attack from, and that indication can be wrong. Sometimes you are told they are attacking from the south, and then they come from the east or the west, just to make things more fun. The archers, you place them and they will happily fire anything that resembles an enemy, but they seem to not attack when the enemy is close. I don't know whether the animation of the arrows are just not showing, but they seem to be rather passive. And your infantry, they if you just click on them, they will go and seek out the nearest enemy, and if you click on a target, they will go and seek out that target. It's all quite luck dependent, it feels like, and as you can probably see, the enemy have no issues even with normal footmen to take down your walls, meaning that when you're trying to build the castle, you are constantly suffering these extremely annoying setbacks. Of course, on top of that, the men you lost have to be replaced, and that is not something you can just do overnight. It's something that takes time. Obviously, the better your men is, the better they will deal with an enemy, but that costs money and, again, time. And of course, any soldiers you do lose in these random skirmishes are replaced by complete newbies, apparently. And so you can spend an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money retraining. On top of that, your available force is directly dictated by how many castle structures you have built, or components I should say. So depending on how many completed components you have limitation on how many archers and infantrymen you can hire or train or whatever. The two resources you have direct control over is your money and food. Food is necessary to keep your soldiers fed in siege situations, but it's also important to keep them fed over the winter. So any food that you store up will be consumed, a certain amount of it, over winter to keep your soldiers fed. And of course, they also need to be paid, so you need to have a certain amount of gold and food in reserve when the builders go for the winter break, which happens between the 1st of December and the 1st of March the following year. If you don't have enough food, you will find that when you start the new year, you will have quite a portion of your soldiers missing from the previous year, and that means that you will have to rehire, retrain, restock on troops, and sometimes the game decides that at the beginning of the new year is a good time for you to come on attack, and if you have a third of the soldiers you expected to have, you can imagine how quickly it becomes an unwinnable situation. The laborers, you need quite a few laborers. You need to have, or make sure to have enough builders, carpenters, laborers, whatever, in order to keep at least 3 sections of castle wall or tower going at any one time. If you don't, it will take forever and you will never get anything done, because you will be able to build 3 or 4 pieces, then the enemy will attack and destroy 2 of them, and then you are taking 2 steps back for every step you step forward. So it is a necessary evil to actually fill up on the amount of workmen you can acquire. Which of course also costs money. Everything costs money. The problem I find with this game is its pacing. I've not done myself any favors to play it on the slow speed, but I just want to make absolutely sure that I didn't run into any issues, because something I discovered in a playtest I did was that because this game is a bit heavy, it can be very tempting to run it on something faster than 7.14 MHz or 7.09 whatever megahertz. But the game doesn't necessarily run quicker for it, but the computer's decisions appear to be done quicker, which means that you can find yourself in a bit awkward situation in different fights, which is something I've experienced in certain Amiga games, where if you if you have a higher rated CPU than work standard Amiga 500, then you can find that you're not gaining much benefit, but the computer, because of course it goes through instructions a lot quicker, will, I don't like to use the term think, but you know what I mean, it can act faster. and that definitely in combat situations seems to be the um, issue with this game. It could be just be me. I mean, I'm not denying that. Even if you run it on a Swift setting, it's still going to be slow going, and of course, because of these annoying attacks that constantly set you back, you can't help but feel that you are pushing a very, very heavy boulder uphill. Sometimes the game isn't quite aware of what you actually wanted to do. You can find yourself in positions where you give your laborers an order to build a wall. And then they will build a wall, and then you will come on the attack, and then you come back and they will not set the wall again. You click the wall and see that you have assigned the maximum amount of laborers that you can to building a set wall, and you realize that it is set as you expected it to be set. But in worst case scenario, you can be forced to have him to tear down the wall and then rebuild it before the game will actually accept that you are trying to build said wall. Now, when I was playing this game, I kept thinking about Stronghold. I know Stronghold came quite a few years after this, but I wonder if the guys behind Stronghold was actually inspired by this game, because at some level it's quite similar to castles. Of course, you have the micromanagement of having to build your quarries yourself and keeping your citizens fed and all that, but the castle building, the defending of your castles, and constantly having to rebuild because you come under attack and all that kind of stuff, feels very, very similar, but on a completely different level, of course, because Stronghold is a far more advanced game than this. We can talk graphics and sound. It is of any interest. The graphics is, for the type of game, decent. The introduction picture is spectacular. It looks absolutely beautiful. But the game's graphics itself is perfectly functional without being what's it called, or inspiring. I mean, you can see once you get around to building your castle after about 3.5-4 hours play that it is looking like a castle, and it is, I'd say, not unpleasantly looking. The other sounds in the game, there's basically only the music. There may be some very minor sound effects, but if they are, then they are so incredibly subtle that I haven't noticed them. So the music pieces are medieval like I suppose. Doesn't really give anything. I don't think I would ever notice if they weren't there, let me put it that way. But of course, as with every game, I should say, it comes down to gameplay. And I found personally that the gameplay in this game is sort of enchanting and a royal pain in the butt at the same time. The time it takes to build things and constantly have them torn down by enemies without siege equipment. Monty Python in the Holy Grail tried to attack a castle with their swords and did nothing. But of course this is a game, so men attacking walls with a sword is perfectly reasonable that you take down a tower that took 2.5 months for 90 men to build. You take that down in 10 minutes. Makes perfect sense, but I suppose it is a game mechanic, and as such it has to be accepted. but it doesn't have to be liked, and I can say for sure that I don't like it. The only defense you have against the enemy units destroying your walls is your own troops, and they can be quite questionable in their behavior, and you can have 300 archers and 300 infantry with a relatively high combat skill and still get absolutely mauled by the enemy force. So basically, every single time you come under attack, it's some sort of reset. But that's not the best part about this game. Best being slightly sarcastically said. It will become quite apparent at some point or another in this video that the castle is complete. But it's not complete. By the way, I missed out the 3 walls. If you look at the keep, the 3 rightmost walls are not completed, and it took me a while to notice that, but I got that fixed. The thing is, once you complete your castle, you are told, or you are asked whether you are sure that you have finished building a castle, and if you say yes to that, of course you have to fight the phase 1 final attack thing. That is to be expected. In that final attack, I got absolutely mauled, completely crushed. My men may as well not have been there. So of course I decided to reload the game, because I mean, I was smart enough to save 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 game days before the castle was completed. And when I reloaded, I was told I had 75 out of 76 sections completed, but there was nothing that needed to be built. I checked every single tower, every single wall, everything. And there was nothing missing. But according to the game, I had 75 out of 76 pieces completed, which meant that I would probably have been forced to tear down a wall and rebuild it for the game to actually realize that the castle was completed. So I was unable to retry that combat mission without further building management stuff, and in all honesty, after sitting with this game for about 3.5, nearly 4 hours for one level, I didn't particularly want to carrying on to find out whether I could solve that issue or not. For those with any medieval interest or historical interest, I suppose this game could have some sort of draw, but for me personally, it has some incredibly annoying aspects to it that I just can't see myself playing this again. I was half contemplating the idea of making a mini-series out of this, but after this quite extensive play session for one level, and I'm realizing that because I reloaded the game, it had lost count of my castle structures, or castle components I should say. The attractiveness of carrying on playing this game just vanished. Had it been running slightly smoother, faster, and didn't have all the annoyances that it have, I would probably like it a lot more than I do. But here's a look at the finished, unfinished castle. Not finished, but it is definitely finished. There's no missing walls, no nothing. But according to the game, it wasn't finished. So, on that note, thanks for watching, take care, see you next time. Bye bye for now.